I thought about the word emergence actually, and it's really, I'm going to talk about some what I call life sentences. And these are sentences, this is going to be 4 of them, things that have popped up in my life, either that people have said to me, or quotations, and in one instance something that I've said myself. And it's maybe stretching the meaning of emergence a little bit far, but they're sentences that have caused things to emerge in me. And the first is a little story about me when I was 10. And I was living in, can't quite remember where I was living. It was in Evesham or somewhere like that. And I was living with my parents, and the war was on, and I was at various boarding schools and things like that. And I was living with my mother, and she had a friend called Gregory, who seemed to be about twice my size, and twice my volume, and dark, and I was completely petrified of this man. And he used to come around quite often, and I would disappear into my room and didn't really want to have anything to do with him. And one morning my mother said to me, Gregory is going to the post office, will you go with him? Which was like a death sentence really for me. The last thing I could imagine was going with this guy. But I had to go. And we set off on gravel, because the roads were made of gravel where I was living. And I remember his sound on the gravel was like a real, like a sort of heavy, serious thing. And I sounded like a mouse on some sand. And I felt very sort of feeble and a bit scared of this guy. And he suddenly turned to me and said, why are you so selfish? It's not a really wonderful thing to hear from somebody. And I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. And there was a pause which seemed to last forever. And he said, you're 10 years old and you let your mother make your bed. And I was amazed that somebody had noticed that. And for me, it was the first time that I realized, I think, that my behavior was visible to other people. It was the first time I realized there was connection between how I behaved and how other people constructed their idea of me. And it emerged in me in that I realized that for most of the clients that I've ever worked with, I've sort of wanted to say, why are you so selfish to these big organizations that I work for? Because there's certain truths, and I know I've only got 10 minutes, it's a little story. There's a cafe in London which I can't tell you what it is, but it's very worthy. It's beautifully designed. They give you leaflets which tell you how caring they are about the animals that they then kill and we eat, and how it's all organic and all of this. And it's a very gentle place. And one of the waitresses came out to me, and I just inadvertently said, do you enjoy working here? And she said, it's all right. And I said, well, how long is your shift? 12 hours with a 1-hour break. So for me, that was a real example of, it seems okay, but she let her mother make her bed, if you see what I mean. People tolerate pretty terrible behavior. So that was the first sentence that stayed with me. Why are you so selfish? And I always am saying it to myself, and I'm always not saying it for people that I work for, but wishing I had the courage to say it. So that was the first sentence. The second one was by Maya Angelou, which I think is a fantastic thing, and it's made a huge difference to me. She said, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I think that, for those of us that are designers, is a really critical thing to remember. Because people don't read what you write, they read what they read. And people don't hear what you say any more than people are hearing what I'm saying now. You're hearing what you choose to hear. And so the feeling that you get from meeting anybody is more important than what they actually say. And I'll tell you a very, very quick story. A friend of mine used to run McKinsey in Scotland, a Frenchman. And he had a brother who spoke not a single word of English, not one word. And he invited his brother to come and stay with him in a boarding house where he lived outside Edinburgh. The brother turns up, and in the drive to the house, he says to his brother, you only need to learn 2 sentences in English. One is, how do you do? It's a pleasure to meet you. and the other is, I had a fantastic time, thank you very much. Okay? So he taught him these 2 sentences until he was word perfect. And he arrived, he spent 4 days there. He arrived and said that sentence, and he left and said the other. 3 months later, the landlady said to Jacques, my friend, your brother, what an interesting man. So, just a couple other things about how things feel. We had in Wolff Olins 2 copying machines. One was a Xerox, one was a Canon. And you switched them on, and they warmed up. And I remember it very, very clearly, that when they were warmed up, one of them said start, I think it was the Canon, and the Xerox said ready. And I remember the feeling that the one that said start was telling me it was up to me. I had to start. And the other one that said ready made me feel it was going to do it. And I'm simply telling you that story because these tiny nuances in language are so important. A very, very well-known client of mine, a wonderful man who used to run Smith's, he's no longer on this planet, he always used to say to me, I agree with you. Now, most people will say, I agree with you. Some people will say, I agree with you. But this man systematically said, I agree with you, and it made me feel fantastic. And one other occasion where somebody was brilliant at making me get a feeling, I had to have lunch with the governor of the Bank of England. I can't remember why. I think I was working for them. It can't have been anything to do with money because I don't understand money. So it was to do with their centenary or something. And I was terrified of meeting somebody called the governor of the Bank of England in the court of the Bank of England with all his fellow directors. I was really very, very self-conscious and scared. 3 days before the meeting, I got a postcard saying, Dear Michael, we're so much looking forward to seeing you, Robin. Brilliant. Because he knew that not that I would read it, but that I would feel completely different. He knew that I was going to be scared, and he knew how to make me feel calm. So that's the second sentence. The third sentence is by a chap called Norman Vincent Peale. And what he said was, the trouble with most of us is that we'd rather be ruined by praise than saved by criticism. Now, I thought that was a fantastic thing to say. For me in particular, because all my work has been flawed. I have never done flawless work. And so for me, criticism is like nourishment. Criticism where I can see the shortfall in what I do and the shortfall in what I will always continue to do, because nothing is flawless, nothing we do. You know, even wonderful discoveries, you know, even wonderful answers that people find turn out to be other questions. So nothing is perfect. And that's fantastic. And that's why criticism is such a wonderful thing and makes you feel so great. And the final, because I've only got 10 minutes, our meeting is only 10 minutes long, is a quote from me, actually, which is, you can't wear 2 pairs of shoes at the same time. And to be in others' shoes, you have to take your own off. Well, I've been involved in something called inclusive design now for several years. And one of the things that struck me about me doing it was I discovered all sorts of shameful things, really, that I was scared of people who are completely blind. I felt uncomfortable, or maybe scared is a bit overcooked, but I was uncomfortable with them. And every time I went on one of these challenges where designers were working with partners who had some problem or other with their site, or whatever it may have been, I would feel some embarrassment about working really closely with them. And on one occasion in Dublin, there was a young man there with a neurological illness called cerebral palsy. That's a terrible name, but there we are, that's what he had. And he couldn't control his movements. He couldn't control his movements at all. Everything was uncoordinated. And he had a little microphone, I don't know if it was a microphone, something by his neck, which produced text on a screen in front of him. And I was uncomfortable around this guy. We had about 4 teams, and I noticed about after lunch that I had been coaching 4 of the teams, but avoiding the team that this guy was in. And suddenly I found myself behind him in his wheelchair with his team, on the right-hand side of the Liffey River in Dublin, where there's a wall which is just high enough to stop kids falling in. And I was walking behind him, and on his screen it said, "I can't see over this fucking wall." Now, the moment I saw that and heard his language and felt empathy with him, I was able to completely be in his shoes and drop what was in my shoes, which was discomfort. So for me, being able to be in other people's shoes is, after all, what all of us who are in whatever creative business we're in, is what it's all about, because we're here to serve people. And if we can't be in their shoes, we can't serve them. So taking our shoes off, whatever expertise is in them, is absolutely crucial if you're going to serve other people. You've got to really understand them. So here was a situation where, simply because of a few words of language, and actually one naughty word, I was able to create a conversation with this guy. So, one other point about that, and that is that when you go into a hospital, you will probably find that nobody asks you what you want to be called, and nobody will ask you, if you're going to be an inpatient, is there anything that you would like to say about yourself that you would like people to know? You're not asked that. The result of not being asked that is that when the medical profession walk down a ward, they will refer to you by what's wrong with you. So if you hear a consultant walking down a hospital ward with a nurse, you'll probably hear him say, "There's 2 emphysemas, a coronary, and a couple of whatever it is." And you don't know who they are either, because you've got somebody with a white coat, probably called an oncologist or something, whatever that is, or a registrar, whatever that is. So it seems extraordinary to me that people as sensitive as we all are, as everybody is, don't follow through and put labels on people so that I can walk past this guy and see that he's a cab driver. Or this guy can walk past me and I can see that he's a junior doctor with particular experience in bladder cancer, or whatever it may be. Why can't we communicate who we are and what we do in a way that makes empathy possible in a hospital? So all I want to do really now is to conclude by asking you to remember, whatever you're doing or whatever you're designing, that there are people who see less well than you, who hear less well than you, who feel less well than you, who think less well than you, and who are less well than you, and to embrace them in your considerations of what you do by taking your shoes off and putting theirs on. Thank you.